Let's talk about building endurance on the saxophone. So I get a lot of messages on social media where people are asking me how they can build their endurance. They're getting tired as they're playing long shows or multiple set gigs. They just aren't making it through. And this is something I struggled with for a long time as well. But over the years, I found ways that I can build my endurance so that I can make it through these long sets, and it doesn't really bother me anymore. The first thing I want to talk about is your setup. Some of us have very resistant setups, and you might be doing that on purpose. Maybe you think that you're getting a better sound out of the reed and the mouthpiece combination that you have, and that mouthpiece reed combo just happens to be a little more resistant, and that's fine. But if you have a resistant setup, you're going to have to do more strength building to compensate for that. You don't have to have a resistant setup. For years and years, people would tell me, play on a stiffer reed, you have a better sound, and I found that that isn't true. What you need to have is a reed that is stiff enough. The reed has to complement the mouthpiece in a way that the mouthpiece and the reed work together properly. Now, some setups are just more resistant. If you're playing classical, a C star is going to be more resistant than a Rousseau and C4. And you may decide that you like the sound of one or the other, and then you'll have to decide, is the trade-off worth it? But for jazz playing, I haven't found that it's worth playing on a resistant setup at all. In fact, I'm just looking for easier setups all around all the time. And most of the major manufacturers out there right now have setups that are very easy to play on. Keep in mind, this doesn't mean that you're looking for a weaker reed or a smaller tip opening necessarily. You're just looking for that reed and mouthpiece combination that works together and feels easy. Why make it hard on yourself? I remember talking to Gerald Albright because I wondered the same thing if he got fatigued when he would play these long shows. And he told me once that he had a show where he had to do a 2-hour set at 5 and he had to do another 2-hour set at 7. And at the time that I asked him, I would not have been able to make it through that long of a set myself. So I asked him if he got fatigued, and he said no, he doesn't really get fatigued. He said, but once he did get fatigued, and it was because the reed he had put on was just a little too stiff, and that made that show really hard. So I kind of feel like if Gerald Albright is trying to make his life easy, we should be trying to make our lives easy. Let's find setups that we like our sounds on, but let's not make it harder than it has to be. So your setup is just one small part of the puzzle. The bigger part of the puzzle, and what makes the most difference, is conditioning your muscles to be able to make it through. Now, this is somewhat difficult because the muscles in the embouchure, there aren't that many of them and they're small. And so it takes a long time to build endurance in these muscles. And that requires a habitual, intentional practice routine that you can stick to. A lot of the people that message me when I ask them what their practice routine is like, a lot of them say, well, I'm practicing 30 minutes or an hour a day. And for some of you, that's the only time that you have. But you can't be surprised if you're practicing 30 minutes or an hour a day and then you have to do a 2-hour show and you're not making it through. The practice that you've done just hasn't been sufficient to build those muscles. You have to think of it like a marathon runner. Marathon runners in general don't train for the marathon by running sprints. They train by running long distances. It's the habitual, intentional, long-term practice sessions that have to be done. So the first thing to realize is there's different types of practice. There's practice when you're trying to learn licks or you're trying to learn phrases, you're trying to memorize songs, and you may be practicing for 2-3 hours at a time, but if you think about it, maybe that practice is broken up into groups. You'll practice a little bit. If you start to get a little tired, you'll stop. You'll practice a little more. If you start to get tired, you'll stop. And this is beneficial, but it isn't the same thing you would experience when you are on a performance stage. So while sometimes your practice routine may be breaking things up and learning these licks and practicing your improvisation or your tone and things like that, you have to have other practice sessions that are simply designed to build your endurance. Now, you can combine these together, but the focus has to be on endurance building. So what we're really talking about here is practice the way you're going to perform. Run the show. Look at your set list. Go tune by tune by tune, play it all through, see how you do. And this will give you valuable information on your progress and how you're extending your playing time. Now, we all have heard about long tones. They help you build your tone and they help you build your endurance. It is difficult to sustain a pitch for a long period of time with minimal breaks. But one problem with long tones is they're not very fun for most people. So one thing I like to do is incorporate my long tones with another useful activity. Here's an idea. You could put on a backing track and make your long tones a voice leading exercise. So play a whole note per bar without breaks. It's okay if you tongue, but don't relax your embouchure and take it off of the mouthpiece. Try to keep it focused on the mouthpiece through the duration of this long tone exercise. Here's an example of what I might do if I were working on the song Autumn Leaves. some of you trying that may already be getting fatigued after just those 8 bars because you're not used to having to focus on the mouthpiece consistently for that long. So when you're doing something like this in an endurance-focused practice session, it's important that you bring yourself to fatigue and then give yourself a chance to recover. You should never push yourself past fatigue, and you should never do anything that causes pain. If you're experiencing pain, you should stop. But what I like to do is take myself to fatigue, and then I will give myself a 2-3 minute break, maybe as long as 5, but never more than that, and then go back and do the same exercise or something different. Maybe I do long tones on a different backing track this time, and maybe I'm learning how to voice lead on a different song, and that would be awesome. But I bring myself to fatigue, and then I stop and I recover again. And I may do that as many as 3 times in an endurance-focused practice session. Now, this may only be the first 30 minutes of that session, and then from then on, I can still try to keep myself playing as much as possible, but I'm not as worried about bringing myself to fatigue anymore, so I will take more breaks as I go along. Also, you may find that playing high in the register taxes your embouchure more than in the low register. So after you've done the fatigue and recover cycle, you may want to spend some time alternating between the high and the low range. So as you start to get a little tired, move down to the low range where you can be a little more relaxed. And then as you feel up to it, start moving back up into the high range. Really focus on your lower lip and make sure that we're not digging into our lip with our teeth, that we're not causing damage. And if something hurts again, make sure you stop. And this is not something that you accomplish over days. This is something that you accomplish over weeks and months. Now, these endurance-focused practice sessions, I alternate. I don't do them every day. I would do one day, and then the next day I would do a practice session that is more focused on learning content, learning licks, learning patterns, whatever else I want to do. And I'm taking ample breaks, and I'm not focused on building my endurance. I would also never work on an endurance building practice session on the day of a gig, and probably not even the day before an important performance. Another thing I do to build my endurance is not done in my practice sessions. It's done at another time when I don't even have the saxophone in my hands. One of these times is when I'm driving my car, and there's a couple exercises that I'll do. My favorite exercise to do in the car is called the ooh-ee, or the dynamic smile pucker exercise. And the way this works is you will pucker, and when you pucker, you focus on these corners that you're making them very tense. You're really flexing any muscles that you feel like you have in these corners. And you're going to go, ooh, really, really tight. And then you're going to slide for 10 seconds back to an E, which is a smile. So, ooh. And you get the E as back as far as you can go. And that whole time you're focusing on keeping these muscles very, very tense. And then you'll return from the E, you'll push back to the ooh. Now, if you do this repeatedly and you keep tension in these muscles here in the corners, you're going to find you start getting fatigued very fast. Something that I like to do is put a song on, and most of the songs I listen to are about 4 or 5 minutes, and I'll try to do that through the duration of one song, and it's very challenging to do. And then I'll give myself a song break, and then on the 3rd song, I'll do it again, and I'll try to do 3 sets of those a day. Another thing you can do is just anytime you're thinking about it, do static puckers or smiles. You just hold the ooh for as long as you can, or you hold the E for as long as you can. Now, the real benefit of the oohs and e's in building these corner muscles is this is where your primary control over your sound comes from. So as you start to get tired, these muscles are going to be staying strong to help support that sound throughout your entire performance. One thing the oohs and e's don't do a lot for, though, are some of the muscles that may be under the lip. Some of you may find that you get really tired right here, right under the lip, or right down here in your chin, because you tend to bite just a little bit as you get tired. An exercise that I love to do is a 360 isometric exercise, where you take something round like a pencil. I'm using the back of my Reed Geek right here, and you just put it in your mouth and you just squeeze 360 degrees around that cylinder. And I try as much as possible to make sure I'm not using my teeth to help support it. It's okay to use a little bit of the teeth, but as much as possible, try to just feel like you're engaging the muscles around the lips. A pencil is really great for this because it's not very heavy, but it's also very sturdy, so you can really put a lot of pressure around. A straw sometimes you might crush, and that might not be as good of an option. Another thing that I might do is if I'm working at my computer or something like that, I'll just take my mouthpiece and I'll just put it in my mouth. And I'll just sit there while I'm doing whatever work I'm doing until I start to get tired. And if I start getting fatigued, I'll take it out and I'll rest for a minute and then I'll put it back. And what you'll find is that will really start to get the muscles here under the lip burning just a little bit. So these are the things that I have done to help build my endurance. And now after doing this routinely for years, I seldom feel fatigue even after playing long shows. Make yourself a plan and get yourself into a routine and see if these suggestions and exercises help you increase your endurance.